Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Jaguar's old motto used to be grace, space and pace. And in my opinion, no other car in the company's history matches that slogan quite like the X308 XJR. I am slightly biased of course because this 1998 4-litre XJR is mine. I bought it back in 2016. This is a two-owner car with a history file thicker than an Argos catalogue. It has had a fortune spent on it over the years, which is why now at 21 years old it looks and drives as well as it does. In fact, the previous owner had it since 2001, and the money that's been spent on this car, you could have actually bought a house somewhere, I'm sure. The X308 Jaguar was released in 1997 and ran until 2003 when it was replaced with the X350, which I've done a video on a few months ago. This was the last evolution of the XJ40 platform, which has been around since 1986. And for me, the XJR version of the X308 was and still is the prettiest four-door saloon car ever made. Can you honestly think of a prettier car than this? A prettier saloon car than this? I think they just get the balance so right. There are many adjectives you could use to describe this car. It's stately, but also subtle. It's glamorous without being ostentatious. It was a blatant display of wealth, but it's never vulgar. It's majestic, but it's also quite menacing. I love the long bonnet, or hood, if you don't like using English. I love the grooves in the bonnet. I love the long boot too. As you saw in the X350 XJ video that I did, I am a huge fan of that too. But the X308 just looks so much nicer. The X350 is quite chunky and quite fat, whereas the X308 is dainty and delicate. I just think it looks perfect. You could have bought a non-R version of the XJ, either a Sovereign or an exec. But in my opinion, well, for starters, they make you look like a retired pub landlord or John Prescott, neither of which are looks that I'd like to encourage. Secondly, they sit much higher, the wheels are too small and don't fill the wheel arches, and there's way too much chrome, it's a little bit sickly. Whereas the R just looks so much better. It's got a sport suspension, so it sits a little bit lower. You get bigger wheels, wider wheels, fat tyres, and they've got rid of all the chrome. And instead you get matte black, which looks far better in my opinion. And the R gets a 4-litre Supercharged V8. The R version just looks like it means business, and that's before we even get to the interior, which is equally impressive. The interior is beautiful, it's very simple and stylish. You get leather and wood everywhere. It's like being inside the drawing room of a stately home. Under the bonnet of the R version, you get a 4-litre V8 with a supercharger, which produces 370 horsepower, which even in today, 21 years later, is an impressive number. But way back in 1998, I mean, that was virtually unheard of. It made it one of the quickest four-door saloon cars ever made. It was mated to a 5-speed Mercedes-Benz automatic gearbox, which is a fact I was never aware of until I had the gearbox service last week and my mechanic told me. So they rarely go wrong, and it just makes the shifts silky smooth. You'd never know what gear you were in, to be honest. Unbelievably, this car was capable of hitting 60 miles an hour in 5.5 seconds, which is 911 territory. So, once again, if I approach the bypass, let's blow the cobwebs off it, shall we? You do get the faint noise of the supercharger kicking in, and it just propels you to the speed limit in no time at all. Jaguar made 15,000 XJRs in the 6-year period, so they were quite a popular car, although you rarely see them on the road today, and you do get lots of attention and lots of looks. It was limited to 155 miles an hour, so based on those figures, you would expect this to be some raw, unmanageable monster, wouldn't you? That was out of control. Well, it isn't. It's really refined, really smooth, really quiet, and just very easy to drive. You just glide along in this thing from A to B without any effort whatsoever. Bear in mind, this one's done 166,000 miles, so it's not like some low mileage, pristine example. This has been used. Now the ride, although this is the Sporty Spice version, is very soft and very supple and very comfortable. You'd expect, because it's got sport suspension, to be firm like an M Sport BMW, and it isn't at all. But it's also not a wallowy blancmange either. It corners very flat, and although the steering is light and effortless, you can do it with one finger. you do get a surprising amount of feel through it, so you know what's going on beneath you. And the wooden steering wheel, I mean, as you're driving along, it just makes you feel like you're in something classy and luxurious, and you rarely see that these days. Manufacturers should really make wooden steering wheels a thing again. As you drive along, you've got one hand on the wooden J-gate gear selector, one hand on the steering wheel, and you've got the all-important 3 letters staring back at you, just to remind you that you're in the best version of the XJ. I like the unfussy climate control buttons too. It goes up in whole digits rather than 0.5s, because can you honestly tell the difference between 25 degrees and 25.5? Because I can't, and all it means is that you just have to make twice as many corrections. So this is far simpler. Rear legroom isn't great, not compared to all the other luxury barges anyway. Of course, they did do a long wheelbase version which was far better for chauffeuring around Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. The boot is very spacious, it's very long and wide. The X308 XJR is quite a rare car these days, you rarely see them, so it does get quite a lot of attention. If you have a quick look on Auto Trader, you'll find them from around £5,000, but they go all the way up to £20,000 for a concourse one. This one is far from that, to be honest. I've tried my best to get it in as best condition as I possibly can, but it is 21 years old and it's done 166,000 miles, so there is a limit to what this is worth. This one isn't mint, but it's very nice. I've done loads of jobs to it over the years, but I just rarely use it, which is a bit of a waste. When I bought this back in August 2016, the bodywork looked a little bit sad. It wasn't rusty, it was just kind of a little bit flat. There were blemishes on most panels, and in some areas the lacquer was peeling too. So I had a full respray done a few years ago, and I decided not to put the gold pinstripe back because I just thought it looked cleaner and fresher and more modern. She still picks her feet up, the old girl. So in the 3.5 years that I've owned this car, I have spent thousands on it. To get it through its last MOT a few months ago, well, I'll go through the bills in a second, but I think I spent around 800 quid. It needed an alternator, some new belts, needed a little bit of welding, which is always an issue trying to keep an old car here in the UK. They get to a certain point and they just rot. So I've had this undersealed and whatever else just to try and protect it. But back when I bought it, had it fallen into the wrong hands, it might well have just been scrapped by now, and that would have broken my heart. So although I've spent way more money on this car than I'll ever get back, it's just kept another classic on the road, which makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. I just like the idea of saving a car like this, and I just wanted to keep it as original as possible. So common issues with these, I believe the timing chain tensioners can fail. This one's had it replaced. I think they were just plastic clips that would eventually get brittle and break, causing engine damage if you didn't get to it quick enough. Apart from that, everything that I've spent in it over the years, I wouldn't describe as a common issue. It's just been things like servicing work and things like an alternator. That could go on any car at any point. So I wouldn't describe it as a common issue. I've replaced the battery, had a full service, spark plugs, filters, the whole lot. I've had a gearbox service done. Oh, there is one common issue. When I bought it, the headlining was all sagging like an old Range Rover, so I took it to Auto Trim in Denton, who replaced the whole headlining with a new one. That was about 2 years ago actually, and that cost, I think, around £400, but it's like new now. They did even did the sunroof panel too. So that's quite a common issue on all Jags and Land Rovers of this era. So fuel-wise, it's an old, thirsty V8, so you'll average maybe 15 or 16 miles per gallon round town. But as with all cars like this, once you get them on a run at a steady speed, they're surprisingly economical. You'll get 28 miles per gallon from it, 30 miles per gallon at a push. So that's not the end of the world. Insurance costs aren't too high either, because you can get them on a classic policy now. So I imagine for your average person you would insure this kind of car for around 300 quid a year. So that shouldn't break the bank. Road tax, because it's so old, is around, I think it's £300 a year, so that's not too bad. As with any old Jag, you'll probably get the odd warning light showing on the dash, but that's usually nothing serious and they usually correct themselves. It's normally just an electrical gremlin. Yesterday I was driving this and had an airbag warning light on. It flashed up for a split second to say battery not charging, and then today nothing. It's been as good as gold. So all of those issues could be just because it's not being used. and there's not the correct sort of voltage coming from the battery. That's the trouble with keeping old cars on the road. They need to be driven every day. As soon as you leave them to sit for weeks on end, it really doesn't do them any favours. And that's kind of the trouble. You've only got one pair of hands and one pair of feet, so you can only drive one car at a time. So as much as I'd love to have a big collection of like a dozen cars, I think you'd find yourself just using the same one over and over again. And by the time you got round to taking one of the other cars in your fleet out, it would have a flat tyre and a flat battery. I don't drive this car very often, but every time I do, it just puts a smile on my face. It's just the best of both worlds, this. It's regal and serene when you want it to be, but it's also fun to drive when you're on a country road like this and you want to put your foot down. It really is special, this car. A couple of things that I don't like about it that do irritate me. The steering wheel can only be adjusted up or down rather than in or out, and I would like it to come out a little bit more. There's no cup holders. I've got no heated seats. But apart from that, it's superb. One of the things that I like most about the XJR is it knows its identity. It knows who it is and what it's trying to be. It doesn't have any identity issues. Now what I mean is, it's British. It's obviously very British, but it's patriotic rather than nationalistic, if you know what I mean. It's not a little German Mini with a French engine and those Union Jack lights at the back. It's not over-the-top sickly British. It's just a nice subtle nod to its heritage and its history. The thing with all XJs are, to look at, they look like a big luxury floaty wobbly barge, but they're just not. They always handle really well. They're always very, very chuckable and very agile, which is such a surprise because you would imagine it to just be a wallowy mess. But I absolutely love this car. I love the way it handles, I love the way it drives, I love the way it looks. Anyway, thank you once again for watching. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below and I'll do my best to get back to you. So if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Cheers, guys.